sucker right now. Yes, it is. Hello. Yes, greetings. Good. Yeah. So, since that video or YouTube video from Rob Davis came out, we've probably had another half a dozen members join the group. So that was cool. So, as always, it's informal. If you have questions, just chime in. I was able to get images from Joel and Bernie and Charlie and Mark Richardson. And of course, I've got a bunch of mine in here. And it was a great article that came out in Model Railroad, I think 2, maybe 3 issues ago, where somebody talked about figures tell a story. And I thought, wow, this could be an interesting topic of conversation, and just to give people a sense of what other folks are doing that has them configure the scenes that they do that replicate whatever context they are presenting. So with that, I'm just going to go right into slide mode here. And I just got a little bit playful with this, because if you think, every one of these tells their own little story, and it doesn't take much. So you're all familiar with this, but this was just to give you some orientation, because the first probably 10, 12 slides are going to be from the layout here. So when I think of placing figures for any layout or any diorama, it's always the context. So what's the setting? And mine is this one, Western Atlantic, and it's 1863 summer. So initially I was thinking, and this is just to give you an idea of my thought process as to how I decided to create the bigger picture that helps me channel my thoughts around the scenes. Just choosing Confederate summer of 63 was obviously much less complex. So after context, it's continuity. So looking at what was happening militarily around that time, what kind of activities might be occurring, what do you want to depict? And then which figures to choose from to depict scenes. And then I wanted a balance. I wanted to have both military and civilian operations, or at least trains, just for the variety. So it's considering all those elements of a town and industries that helps, again, guide your choices for figure placement. One of the bottom lines is going to need a whole lot of figures. And do I want to paint figures or build a railroad? So I decided I wanted to build a railroad. So conclusion, find figure painters. And I did. I was able to find over the years about a half a dozen guys that have painted most of the probably 900 plus figures I've got on the layout right now. And then it was a matter of thinking about, well, how do you want to attach these? And, the benchwork being insulation board was definitely a plus, because all I did was insert pins into the legs of the figures for those that were going on the layout. For those that were going in structures, it was either tack or CA. But I love the idea about having the pins in the legs, because you're always able to reposition them, or if you got to get in the scene and do some work, you can pull them right out. So that would be my preferred choice in terms of placement. Here's an example of Atlanta, 1863. You guys have probably seen all the photos of Atlanta just after Sherman came through from George Bernard's photos. And this one, I had the pleasure of LeBron here and him creating this scene based on a couple of images. And I had Brian come in and he did the backdrop, which gives you a nice sense of the extensiveness of how the camp plays out. So this is a bit of a scene where all these figures tell the story of being in preparation for an event that is about to take place. The research that I did also, militarily speaking, I found out that an Arkansas unit, among others, was in Dalton in 1863. A lot of them there were actually there for what they called the Great Revival, because it was that fall that they got their asses whooped in Chattanooga. and there was a major revival in Dalton. And generals were getting baptized. I was trying to find a scene where maybe I can get a figure that looks like Johnson and show him being baptized. It actually happened. The other thing that's so fascinating with Dalton was, although there was a revival going at the time, Dalton had like 30 brothels. So it must have been a real challenge for a lot of these guys. Let me see, revival or red light district? Revival. But so I actually have a couple of structures in there to show that conundrum as well. The flag, I was able to pull off the internet, as I mentioned there. So the fun of this is really the research to see what was actually going on, who was there, what were the players that were involved in any of these particular areas on the WNA. Another was, there was I believe this was an Alabama unit. Is that what it says? Yep. Okay. This was an Alabama unit that was outside of Kingston around 1863. These guys actually participated in the battle over Chickamauga. And of course, these are all Musket Miniatures, except for one prizer figure here sitting on the caisson, on the limber rather. And one of the things I decided to do to make it even more prototypical was, when you get these figures, of course, there's no reins, there's no leather equipment. So I just used some brass wire and flat brass to make the harnesses for the caissons, and added some chain where, can't see it very well here, but where they connect from the limber to the harnesses. Just little details like that to make the scene pop. This was another situation in Chattanooga. In August of '63, the Union Army was starting to bombard the city. So I had a few of these craters from Musket Miniatures, and inserted them. And I don't know if it was DC or DC and I, we decided to come up with the idea of a couple of fellas coming over to help these ladies repair their fence. And, you know, something else that's prototypical, but this is so subtle. You see mostly women here, which were the folks left behind as all their men were out fighting the war. So scenes that reflect even, you know, in a nuance or another layer of the time is always fascinating. Most people don't pick that up. But and on the layout, most of the farms have nothing but, you know, women or maybe a couple of slaves nearby that are working the farm. Another idea, this was DC's idea, because I had decided after researching that in Kingston there was a huge hospital camp, field camp that was set up there. And there was a couple of notations about a wagon train of wounded and dead that they brought in. So what we did was, I had a cemetery up there. Again, that might have been DC's idea as well. But he started to configure an actual burial. And you can see the wife and the two kids. And here's a gravedigger just pausing to give them some acknowledgement of the passing of their loved one. So it's I tell you, it's just so cool finding these little vignettes that you can create and to enhance the story. All right. Another element that I found out about was the Army of Tennessee had their own pontoons, and this is over the Ustonula River near Resaca. And again, geez, DC, I think you're the one that, between you and LeBron, I'm wondering if I actually did anything on this layout. Yeah, so DC he busted up the embankment here. And so you can see the figures are digging in preparation to receive these pontoons. The pontoons were made by a fellow, Chris Comport, who was working with Rail Dreams. And he had done several buildings for me, and I asked him about pontoons. There was clearly a loss in translation because I was wanting wood pontoons. He made these canvas pontoons, which was okay. I mean, it's a detail that I can live with. But again, it's something that was very relevant, not only relevant, but it was true to the time that the Army of Tennessee had a pontoon train. And then it was just a matter of figuring out where could I plausibly get it set up on the layout. Again, I think these are mostly Musket Miniatures as well, except for, what's that one say? Oh, and a rustic rails, right, which are still in business. Crutchfield House, you guys have probably seen images of this or similar over the years. But when I zoomed in, I thought this is a very cool detail. These posters on this plank or this door or tabletop. And so I decided, boy, that's a simple detail to replicate. And it's relevant to the time, except the photo on the left, of course, is 64 and I'm in 63. But you know, how crazy do you want to get with this?
I'm sure they had signs in 63, Tom. It looks great when you're there.
Right. I don't know if they had that one there, but that's okay. I can live with that, right? Yeah. So let's see. Not too much more to say about that. This was another interesting tidbit of history that, you know, since the Union Army occupied Tennessee and Kentucky, it cut the South off from their beef. And there were troops that were sent to Florida to bring up these on these little cattle drives. And one of the other cool elements I found out is that, you know, Bedford Forest was quite active around this area. And so I just took poetic license and figured, well, maybe they had a couple of his boys helping out with the cattle drive. And Don Troiani's books, of course, are fantastic references for the uniforms. So this fella here and the fella on point, they are painted to depict the uniforms of Bedford Forest. This, you know, well, truth be known is there were no blockhouses in 1863. Those were only built, as many of you probably know, by the U.S. Military Railroad. But I thought it was such a cool feature, and Chris really wanted to do it, so he did the research. And you know, some of the little things that he did, which I really liked, he's got a couple of guys just doing a repair job on the roof. You know, subtle things that you can do to just enhance the interest and the more three-dimensionality of the story that you want to tell. For those of you, if I've already told you this story already, my apologies. I've told it 100 times, but there's a guy, Barnsley, father had an import business in London. His son came here, lived in Kingston, built this beautiful mansion. England at the time didn't believe in slavery. So Barnsley paid everybody that worked for him. There was one head person there, this woman that kind of ran the show. And she was there in 64 when Sherman's army came to town, and some of the troops pillaged the liquor cabinet that was in the building, which supposedly was huge. And the guy was a big collector of fine wines and what have you. So she was outraged, jumped in a carriage, took off to the headquarters of the Union Army, raised hell with, I forget the general's name, but he was so moved, he sent her back with an escort. And what they did is they cordoned off the entire structure from the troops, which I thought, you know what, that's a fabulous story. This is a scratch built by Christopher Eldridge as well, based on a painting that was done. And the guy was Mr. Barnsley, very into horticulture and diverse foliage and vegetation. And Christopher did what he could to try to replicate as much of that diversity on this scene as well. All right, we're going to move over to Charlie's M&C. This is Market Street, as it says, circa 1864. Now, the figures you're going to see were scratch built. These are O-scale figures now. But I want you to pay particular attention to some of the figures in the front here and in the middle back. So this is one replica. This is one photo from Charlie. Now you can see here's the gentleman on the left with the white hat cocked to the right. And then Marty depicted him. He's a third figure from the left in the right-hand photo. You can see the man in the left of Charlie's photo with the white whiskers and the arm, the right arm bent. If you look to the prototype photo, you can see the fella right in the foreground on the left. So Marty did what he could to try to position these very similar to the photograph. And if you look in the back, can you see my cursor?
Yeah.
Yeah. You see this figure here with white shirt, vest, one leg up on a tie or something. Well, Marty created that figure right here. There's the vest, legs up. I have no idea how long it took him to make these, but it's pretty crazy. There's another shot of some of the figures that Marty made. All based on that one photo that Charlie sent him of Market Street. Oh, you know what? There's one here. The guy on the left, I know to some degree, some of these look like sombreros a little bit. Or maybe they are of a particular religious sect. I don't know. All right. This is Nickajack Cave on Charlie's layout, and where they mined for, I believe, niter. And Marty had created these figures to do just what you see here, you know, rolling the barrels up on the deck to get them ready for transport out. And there's a nice close-up of one of them. Again, that kind of sombrero look, but it's pretty cool. The fact that he made all these for a specific purpose. Oh yeah, this is just another close-up, just so you can see how many he took from here. There's that one fellow I was telling you about with the vest on the right. The one next to him on the right, if you go to the prototype photo where my cursor is now, you can see that that was that figure. This one here, the figure to the far right. Anyhow, and that's the long shot, just to give you an idea of how many figures Marty made just for that scene. And then Bernie sent me this, he uses all these scale or sizes apparently on his layout. And I think what he does also is, you know, for the larger figures they're probably closer to the aisle, the smaller ones toward the back. And he gives you an idea of, you know, the figures that he uses, the manufacturers. I'm familiar with Old Glory and minifigs, wooden scene like Staten are great. I don't know about the others, but I have a whole list of manufacturers at the end here. And this is just a shot of his. These are the generals. I'm not even sure what part of the layout this is at, but knowing Bernie, these are pretty accurate in terms of what units were there when, and how he's filled out these scenes. I love the perspective that he's got with this, where you see this entire regiment coming in. Beautiful perspective. I don't know. This guy's either, what do you call those fellas that are usually around the camp selling all kinds of stuff?
Yeah.
What do you call them?
Sutlers?
Sutlers.
Sutlers, yeah.
Sutlers.
Sutlers, yes. Sutlers. Or a con man, one or the other. Of course, I guess it could be one and the same. And there's a cool shot. It looks like these might be refugees that are looking for sanctuary, which also occurred. And I believe Bernie does his own painting too, which does a great job. And then you have another very accurate representation of what would have been going on. These guys are camping there. So they're cutting wood and then splitting wood. And I'm not sure how much modification he had to do with these, or did they actually come that way? Then we have, and now this is Mark Richardson. He sent me some shots of his N scale kettle run. And this is just to orient you a little bit. You can see that the Confederates are up where it says enemy up to the top and off to the right along the rail line. And there is something from the probably American Battlefield Trust. So he modeled pretty much this section right here where it says 72nd New York, 70th New York, the Louisiana and Georgia regiments. This is his scenario. And there's a top view of what he did. I think I got this right. See, the Georgia folks are right along the rail line. There's your New York units. He's got General Nelson in here, and your Louisiana units off to the right. So, yeah, it looks like he did a really accurate representation of that. And there's some beautiful little vignettes, if you will, like up at the top left where you have that artillery unit coming over that beautifully weathered looking bridge. Same to the right. And the way he did his road, very nicely detailed. So this is a close-up of those two New York units. And he highlighted the fact that there was a 10-pound Parrott rifle coming in. The thing is, I know it's a diorama, but I'm thinking a 10-pound Parrott gun that close to these guys, whoa, I would not be sticking around. And then you have another view just from the, this is from the west looking east. And he has replicated the 73rd New York Zouaves advancing on this road here, which is called Broad Run, or actually no, Broad Run, I believe, is the creek that flows underneath that bridge. And this is looking west, as it says, along the tracks. And then you have your Georgia unit right here on the left.
And I guess somebody cut the telegraph lines already.
Yep, that's exactly right. Good eye, good eye. And here's from the opposite side behind the Louisiana units. Actually, I think, what are they? I think this was when he was getting, oh, you know what? Those are actually, you know, Walter, I was going to say he was going to hook up something electrically, but I don't know. Maybe it is just the telegraph lines down. That could be. He didn't put that in his notes. I'll get him. And here's another shot from of the rear guard, a shot of the rear guard. And you know what? You're right. It is. It's just a cut lines. Because for a minute there, I thought maybe he's trying to light this up, but no, that wouldn't be right. So Joel sent me this, a very thorough listing of several of these producers for N scale, Thoroughbred, GHQ, Pendragon. I never knew that they did.
A British company, they have an excellent line.
Civil War figures?
Oh, yes. And
Wow.
well, matter of fact, about half of Good Grounds are former Langton models from England.
Right.
In scale.
Cool.
But
Funny.
Dragon has stagecoaches, wagons, civilians.
I've heard of Fun and Games too. Matter of fact, I think I've got a few figures from them. They have some pretty good selection. Yeah.
Fun and Games has the old Rustic Rails line. He bought The in-scale rustic rails line is at Fun and Games. He does not have them on the website. You have to send him a note and he'll send you the listing. I have the listing
Ah,
from him because I just ordered a whole bunch and he cast them and they were freshly cast and all that. So pretty nice. But he has the rustic rails. I do not know who has the rest of the line, the soldier line. I have the soldier line.
wait a minute. Did you say Pendragon has rustic rails?
No, I said rustic rails is from Fun and Games has the rustic rails line.
Ah, okay, got it. Right. They used to belong to Musket Miniatures. So
Yes,
Joel, the figures that are it's the metal ones in a line there. Which manufacturer are those?
those are thoroughbred.
Okay.
Okay. Toby is just recovering from an accident. I know almost all of these guys. Okay. Like all of us, we know the manufacturers. Toby had a really bad accident and had closed his casting shop for about 9 months. And that's his primary method of earning living. And he's just restarted. I don't know if he's put the 10 millimeter Civil War figures back in. But if you go to Thoroughbred, you can contact him and he'll say if he'll do them and when he will have them. He has put together numerous special packages for me.
Cool. Now the artillery unit, whose figures are those?
Those artillery units are GHQ.
All right.
The best in-scale castings. Matter of fact, most of Kettle Run was GHQ.
Got
it. Which is when you said that, I said, well, he's going to do that. Obviously, the large picture is the Stone House at Manassas, which Good Ground put out. Bill Marino is a member of my gaming group. Now, the reason I didn't throw out a lot of my figures because a whole heck of my figures right now are just coming off their wargaming basis. I had over between 1,000 and 2,000 figures, depending on how I count it.
Wow.
You know, I mean, if you count everybody on a gun, that's 5, you know. So I actually had painted because I started off or have always just sort of jointly done the wargaming and the
Model railroading.
railroading.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, Bernie and I have recently been having a great conversation because he just started using the rules that I was in on the development on, and so I get all questions now. How do you do that?
That's great. Cool.
Is Musket Miniature still going?
Well, you know, matter of fact, I was supposed to call that guy 2 weeks ago, and I forgot to call him. Supposedly, yes, but I've heard that. I think Paul might even know. Paul, have you tried to?
Yeah, I did a really big order about a year ago. And, you know, spoke to him, told him what I wanted. He customized some packages for me, but he did, I think it was around this time last year, maybe December. But seems like he was in business.
Yeah.
The individual that bought the 10 millimeter or in scale rustic rails does not have them in production.
Okay.
I'm sorry, he does not have the what?
He does not have them in production, and I have not been able to find out. I've not been able to find any contact information on it.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Got it. So let's see. I think that was the last image. Was just the listing. Yep. So you guys are here for this topic. What else did you want to talk about, or questions do you have about it, or were you just seeing what we were going to do?
One thing I was wondering in the forum a little while back, somebody had there's a new company that you ask what figures you want and they'll make it. what about mules? Because that's one thing I've always, mules seem to be even more popular than horses for a lot of reasons, but everybody horses have a certain beauty to them. I can understand that. But mules from like Roman times up and including World War II, mules are used a lot in war.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at the Civil War, mules in particular did
There
a lot,
is,
except if you, it depends, again, it goes back to what are you trying to depict? You know, if you're looking for artillery and some of the southern units, they probably used mules, but I think, matter of fact, I'm not sure, Joel, you might know their DC, one of you guys, I heard that horses were better for the artillery because they wouldn't challenge the drive toward the battle. Mules were obstinate and had more self-preservation attitude and would refuse to do things where in their mind seemed absolutely stupid.
The other thing my research showed that mules aren't as good in really, really hot, dry weather, that they preferred horses for whatever reason. I don't know how accurate that is, but I read that somewhere.
Nathan, Bedford Forest had about as many mules as horses in his cavalry. So,
Right. Yeah.
Walter,
it is
if you,
riding, what I'm talking about, the riding mules were used. In scale, GHQ produces the best model of a mule. And it comes in there with some of their wagons, which is gorgeous.
Yeah. If you're looking in HO scale, of course, Musket Miniatures used to produce mules, but Dyna Models has a 2-pack of mules, and there is at least one shop on eBay that offers mules. Now, they're not cheap and you have to buy the individual mule, but you can get it with its head turns, straight to the right, to the left.
Ooh.
So, and Dyna Models has them both harnessed and unharnessed, and those are cast metal. I don't know who's making them now.
Yeah, I got both mules and horses from Musket Miniature HO scale.
DC, you mentioned Dyna Models. Did they do anything more than mules?
Yes, they did. They did pigs and
Okay.
oxen, sheep. It's they come up occasionally, like on eBay. I figured I need to use figures I have before I get any more. So
Cool. All right. Any other questions, dude?
What about civilians? Was there a suggestion for civilian figures?
what scale?
O scale, or whichever you.
That list that Bernie had probably would be the most inclusive.
Okay,
That Tom showed earlier.
I see.
Yeah, in scale, you're looking at Pendraken or Thoroughbred for really, really good cast civilians, doing a lot of different things. Rustic. Oh, sorry, I forgot. Rustic Rails has people sawing, chopping wood, all your daily task. And I think those figures are both, I know they're in the N scale line. I think they're also in the HO line.
Okay. Thank you.
Woodland Scenic season has a lot of logging that I think would be appropriate dress.
And Priestley.
I like Pfizer figures because I like to do plastic surgery on them to move heads and arms and legs and stuff. So like I have a group that's waiting to be painted, about 100 infantry soldiers marching. And a lot of their posts are just slightly variations so that they're like you'd expect when you actually watch troops and moving, that even though they're basically the same, but there are lots of different variations, especially if you get away from a city area where they don't have to impress anybody, so they have their guns over their shoulders and other positions. So
Yeah, there's God, I have the figures. It's in that Arkansas unit that I showed you, where they have all these guys marching, but they're in slightly different physical positions, and so you don't have to worry about cutting them up and repositioning arms and heads and things. It might have been GHQ. What just say? You were asking about
those are 25mm figures, aren't they?
which?
The Arkansas unit that you have
Yes.
there in Dalton.
Yes. Yeah. I do this.
Another civilian group for HO are plastic IMEX pioneers for civilians.
Oh, yeah.
Plenty of workers, tools and things of that nature, along with females included of, the pioneer routing and civilian routing. It's works out quite well.
Right. I think for at least the folks that I know, one of the biggest challenges is finding military figures that are in that more informal pose, not battle pose.
Right.
And it's, I think Joel mentioned them between Woodland Scenics and Rustic Rails and others. I just take the civilian figures and just paint them in uniform. And it works quite well to get. Oops. Joel?
Yeah, Good Ground in 10mm makes slovenly Yanks, which are guys sitting around a campfire. It has General Grant and the staff of the Army of the Potomac sitting on the benches around the fire. Famous shot where he's got all of his generals and they're outside a church, but they pull the benches out and have it all lined up. So you find a lot of those kind of relaxing poses. The biggest problem is, I agree, is that the majority of my figures are either marching or attacking.
Yeah. Well, that's what they're supposed to be doing though, right?
Well, yeah, but if they're unloading a train, remember, the U.S. Military Railroad had standards on how fast you had to unload those trains when the supplies arrived.
Right.
Soldiers.
Right. That's yeah. It's somebody say something. Yeah, for me, half the fun, well, at least a large part of the fun is having the scenes take the viewer on the ride that you're trying to convey.
Tom, could you put that list back up with all the manufacturers?
I sure can. This is a partial list because I think a couple of you mentioned some things that I don't have on here.
Yeah, what was the other list with all the emails and everything and phone numbers? That was.
Oh, that was N scale.
Is that only N scale?
Yep.
Joel?
Yes. Well, let's see.
They don't do HO?
Fun and Games also has HO figures and O scale.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, what you're looking for, what happens is you have the wargaming community and the Civil War railroading community. The Civil War wargaming community is much larger than the railroad community. So you have to look at where your figures intersect, and that is an arcane science. Okay, because very rarely do they actually scale their figures. They're in how tall they are over the from the ground to usually the middle of the eye, and very few of those are in fact accurately scaled individuals, because they all come out to be the same height.
Right.
So you mix your lines up, you get little guys and big guys, those kind of things.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's why I even use some Airfix figures on mine. You can get away with, that's why the list, you could take the Knuckle Dusters are a group that Jerry Dykstra, is it Jerry Dykstra? Yeah, no, I forget. Turn me on to. You familiar with them? Knuckle Dusters?
yes, they have a line of scale cowboys. They do have a railroad scale and a game scale. I think
Okay.
they do actually have a railroad scale group of figures. They're really more obviously Old West.
Yes,
Close enough.
exactly. Yeah, you can convert them easily. What do you
Yeah.
got there, DC?
And I can't find the photo that I really wanted to show, but those are a combination of Preiser figures, the old Revell figures that I did some plastic surgery to represent the crew for the Dictator mortar. And
Does Revell still make figures?
you know, you can find them all over the place.
You can find Revell's.
Yeah. You know, the old they made the old like farmhouse, the barns back in the 50s and 60s. There were some like first model kits. But it's easy to take figures and change what would be, you know, into non-combat poses.
Right.
So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience.
Were those hand carts around like 1863?
Hand carts?
You know, the one that tiny DC, that the picture that was just up, you know,
The flat car?
the flat car, you know, that you manually
Yeah, that's a replica. I actually scratch built that one based on the images of the flat car that the Dictator mortar was actually sat on for a while. And I even one of the things that happened, they only used, you know, the theory was great that you put the mortar on a curve and you can push it in position and you can change exactly because it's on a curve where the shells are going to hit, so they're not hitting in the same spot all the time.
Right.
But the recoil would actually send the flat car flying back, and it was only on the flat car for a short time before they put it into its own emplacement, simply because it was carrying the flat car apart. But they didn't use flat cars quite a bit, and I know Dyna Models makes an old P&O railroad flower car that would be very much appropriate for our time area. The spoked wheels and everything.
Eric Koch makes the flower car in scale on Shapeways on the Panamint. His website is called Panamint, like the mining district.
Yep. Yeah, his stuff is great. I just love his stuff.
Hey, Vince, I noticed you put a DMP catalog PDF. It
Oh,
didn't,
it didn't go. I'll send it through the group then. We mentioned Dyna Models. I think that's the same. Did I put the wrong one there?
no, I don't know.
Yeah, I thought I meant to. Anyway, they I had their catalog. I have their catalog, so I just placed it there. It's ancient, but you could probably find some of the parts still. And they had a section in the back on figures. So that's really why I pasted it. Did not go through? let's see.
I got it on the chat, but I tried to open it actually. Wants to
Um,
save it here.
Yeah, it's Dyna Models products. I guess that's why it's DMP.
Got it.
Well, this is me. I don't know what they call themselves, but
Oh, wait a minute there. Cool.
but they made kits. I think they're in Long Island, actually. The catalog probably has the address in there. And but they're pretty crude, plastic roofs and things like that. But the figures are kind of nice. And I have a few of them that came with the kits.
Ah.
That's all.
I've gotten some of their figures through Greenway Models. Again, just like so much of the stuff that we have in our when we're doing our modeling, you find some manufacturers you really like, and all of a sudden they're no longer in business. They passed away, so or whatever.
Has anybody modeled a hospital? Part of my layout
Yes.
is like during a battle.
Yes.
I plan on converting a church to a hospital, but I also saw that they had built hospitals like very quick,
Yep.
square boxes.
Well, they're far more used to hospital tentage. And if you look over in my photos, you'll see the first T-track model we built was of a Union hospital setup battlefield.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm doing it during Chattanooga battle.
Yeah, and they would use, in reality, if you do any of the large battlefield walks, you will find most houses and barns were used at some point during the conflict by the surgeons.
Right.
Just
Musket
likely-
Miniature had a package. I bought with all the different doctors and tables,
Yep.
vents and everything, which
Okay. Look at what LeBron had done. He's I don't know if he's posted pictures of it, but he did a field hospital. I think he used the same figures that you have, Paul.
okay, because there's an area on my layout. I'm going back and forth just to say they converted the church.
Oh, they probably did. Any building, hotels. Yep.
The church downtown Chattanooga that I modeled, I was just going to convert that, which I thought would be probably more realistic.
And you get a chance to do a hospital train. Because there were the sanitary commission owned formal hospital trains.
Right.
And a plan for some of those cars is readily available. In the matter of fact, I think I posted the plans at least once for the hospital.
For the car?
For the Union cars with the big rubber bands, jostle the guys around.
Yeah.
Actually was probably better because they put you in nice fresh straw and packed your wound in sphagnum moss, which is antibiotic and pulls infection.
Yeah. Yeah, that could be a cool scene, Paul. I mean, you have a lot of possibility. Well, a few. I mean, you could put the tents around there where they would have, one place I've seen where they actually had an open, which is a canvas top, sides were open, and the operating table inside with the surgeons around it. Yeah, you could have just stretchers laying on the porch of soldiers ready to go in for their, ready to be just in waiting, in triage.
Yeah, and a big bucket over there for all the discarded.
Yes.
Barrels.
Matter of fact, if you're doing really bad, marker and 10mm is a hospital tent, and the surgeon standing there just finishing, quickly removing the guy's shot up leg.
In the medical school here, in the medical school at Greenville here, we have a photograph from the Civil War hanging in the lobby there of one of these surgeons. And the surgeon is standing there with the tree saw in his hand that he's used to cut the limb off.
Right.
He's got a butcher's apron covered in blood, and he's smoking a cigar through the entire procedure.
Of course.
In the Pentagon, our hall leading up to the vault where I worked, the Army Medical Corps had decorated with Civil War photographs.
Decorated them?
Yeah, well, all the halls in the Pentagon carry parts of the historical art
Oh, I see. Decorated the halls. Got it. With the photographs.
collection is spread throughout the Pentagon,
Cool.
the Navy, the Army.
Yeah.
And that, so you really have galleries as you walk through the building, and a lot of these places are out. But right outside,
How do I get into Pentagon, Joel?
Huh?
How do I get into Pentagon?
signing up for a Pentagon tour if they're holding them right now. It's very easy.
Have them? Okay.
Yeah, it's very easy to do.
Okay.
You're brought in, you're cleared, you're brought in, and you're put in a group, and we have military lecturers in front of you and behind you to keep
Right.
you in a packed little group.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great tour because they'll talk a lot about the stuff. I've watched those guys, they're all volunteers, and they get to do that for about a year. And I've watched them while they're learning how to walk backward and talk through the halls. It's fascinating.
Good.
So I'm curious, Thomas, the photo in Musket Miniature of the Atlanta scene, is that yours?
It might be. I gave him permission.
Yeah, because he's got Al's Fort Warren. He has a photo of that.
Yeah.
It looks like he has a photo of your Atlanta.
Uh-huh.
And then there's a photo of another one I can't quite recognize, and it may be yours or it may be Al's.
What's in it?
It's a bunch of covered wagons.
Oh, that's probably mine. Yeah.
Is that yours?
I told him I would take some photos of the figures this is years ago, and he could use them in his promotional materials.
Yeah, they're all over his website.
Oh, geez. Okay,
So
cool.
he's using them.
Good. That's why he's been so generous with giving me stuff. He was very generous. Yeah. But I got to call him, see how he's doing. I know he's had some health issues over the years. And he disappeared for about 4 months.
He had a bad accident,
recently?
cutting something with his hand or something. That's what, he wasn't really doing anything for a while because he had some kind of issue with his hand. I don't know if he almost cut his finger off or something like that.
Wow.
I recall. That was his issue where he wasn't doing anything for a while, but I caught him last year when he was getting better.
Cool. Good. Let's see.
Somebody on Shapeways, Paul, makes a U.S. military railroad hospital car. And I can't remember. I see Ron shaking his head. Ron may not remember the guy's name, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I haven't said anything because I can't remember who makes it, because I know that Musket Miniature does the Civil War hospital, field hospital, and then they also do a camp scene with like 13 soldiers, which is
Who does that?
Musket Miniatures.
Oh, yeah.
Sets. Yeah. I was looking for source. That's why I hadn't said anything. I'm trying to remember, where did I get those? Because most of a good bit, I mean, unless you've got a specific battle going on at the time that you've set your railroad, I mean, most of a soldier's life is sitting around and waiting.
Right. That's
So
right.
it's like finding all those different poses of, the route, digging latrines and doing the routine day-to-day camp life. But because most of our miniatures were originally out of the wargaming genre, which are in battle poses, it's really difficult to find. That's why and the other thing, DC said it, is you find something, I find something, I buy it. Even if it's years away. It's like, that's it. I want that. I get it right now, because next week I could go back on the web and look for them, and it's like, sorry, we've gone out of business. So yeah, it's some of these bizarre things that you're looking for. If you find it, share it with everybody and buy them up, because things come and go so fast.
Yeah.
Well, you know, if you're doing camp scenes, you want figures like are sitting around with a cup of coffee in their hand, and maybe somebody playing the banjo or a guitar. Now it would be a small guitar, it wouldn't be one of the big acoustic guitars. You know, sitting around playing cards or checkers. Those are the type, you know, fry pans, washing fry pans, you know, putting wood on the fire. Those are the types of figures that kind of, you know, since we're talking about telling a story, you know, the story of camp life, as you said, you know, it's, you know, a 99% boredom and 1% sheer terror, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Matter of fact, Woodland Scenics makes a couple of good packages of figures, musicians and what have you. Can paint them as Confederates. I got a crew just sitting around together. There's a banjo and a bass player and a guy on a harmonica and a couple of guys dancing. And then there's another campfire where there's just 3 or 4 guys just sitting around. And it's fun to, I don't know what it is. I guess there's a storyteller in all of us. You know, we love reading, we love seeing movies and what have you. And when you get a chance to manufacture your own story and see how they blend together. Because the other thing that's fascinating is not only do you do a scene, but I sometimes look at like what's to the left and right of that. And is there any continuity, or is it just a complete breakaway where it doesn't blend in your mind? So I should probably ask people more when they come by, because they just say what they don't actually, they're so, I guess, blown away with how much there is up there. You got to really help pull their eyes into a particular scene because they're looking all over the place. And so that's why I like doing tours. So when you think of your layout, you might even want to think of, because people are going to come see it, you know, what's your presentation like? You know, what do you want that to depict so that when they're seeing it, they're going to get the image and the experience that you're hoping to convey.
So right now I'm in the process of, I'm just getting ready to put the top on. So now, as I'm thinking ahead of things, as I build because what you don't want to do is build something and then go, damn, I wish I'd have set it up so I could put lights inside it. It'd look really cool. So I'm thinking about all that stuff down the pipe. I'm building structures and the reason I know that is because I already done that. It's like, now I got to drill a hole in the bottom and figure out how I'm going to mount it. So I found all these little LED bulbs that are flickering candles and fires and those, so you know, so it's like so I just got, in fact they just delivered it, I got 75 LED yellow candle, so that as I'm building structures I can think about where would a light be in the building. Again, what you're talking about, bringing them to life.
Yeah.
So the other piece of it is I'm looking to add the difference between a locomotive that has sound in it is a locomotive that doesn't have sound in it is amazing, because I've been on the layouts, I've seen the guys that have this, and it's just, it just brings them to life. So the other piece of it that I'm also looking at is how do I add sound to the various scenes? So if there's a machine shop, can I replicate that in sort of a background to create that illusion of a scene and a story? And if there's a mill and they make sound cards that you can install under your layout and attach a little speaker, and then you can have the sound of water and the wheels spinning, and to create those kind of scenes and you can get them for specific eras, for specific times, and it's fascinating because all the research right now I'm doing, looking at all the sites that actually produce cards that you can hook up. You can run on DC, you can run DCC, that'll hook up to sound, and so it begins to bring each little spot on your layout to life. But
Wow.
one of the things I'm thinking is that, you know, again, rather than waiting until I get parts of it put on and then go, damn, I wish I would have allowed for, included a space for, figured out how I was going to do before I built that structure. I'm going in and going back to a couple of the earlier figures or the earlier structures and figuring out how I can thread wire in there and get a little candle light in there so that I can light the layout and do those sort of things, and what would have been the appropriate kind of lighting. did Martinsburg have streetlights that, you know, that the individuals went
Yeah.
to lit every night, and would that be
Yeah.
something that to include to create a dusk sort of environment? But yeah, all those kind of things. The sounds of old steam engine, donkey engines that might be around different manufacturing locations or around the roundhouse. They're all different ways to sort of create the scene.
The ambiance, yeah.
Sounds
Yeah,
like it sounds like you're a little John Allen. You guys know John Allen, right? You know the story.
Yeah,
Well, what story? Maybe.
Well, John Allen is gosh, 50s, 60s. I think he died early 70s. The Gore and
Yeah, I know
defeated.
who he, yeah.
Yeah. And the story is he built his house. I think it was like the third layout is the one we always think of. And he built his house, or his house was built, and he dug a basement under it, and he planned the layout at that level. Like even where he put foundation or cement or something, he later used in the layout. Or we put, obviously they didn't have low voltage back then, where he put power, he later used it in the layout. So even 20 years, right, ahead, he was planning what he was going to use in his layout later on, as best we can tell. Even the lighting, and he's just a master.
So
So
when
that's what
he was,
that's what he's known for. And then they found, I think it was in San Diego, there was a model railroading club down in Balboa Park, if you know. Anyway,
oh yeah,
they got one of his fascinating, if it's still there, I mean, it's a few years ago, fascinating museum, but they had a little model of his model. So he built a model of his model, you know, of his layout way back when. And it's pretty, you know, because they know from the dates and things like that, it's pretty accurate of what he eventually built.
Yeah.
But the story was that when he, it was like a house on the side of a hill that didn't have a basement. So he built a basement under it. And as he was doing that part of the excavation, he was planning ahead on what the layout would be. And places where he built the cement maybe a little higher than he would normally would later be used in the layout, because he'd have to stand on it to get to something. Is that kind of thinking?
wow.
And
So wait a minute.
also,
Was this house already built and then he excavated after it was built?
it
Or
had
this
a
was
partial basement,
partial?
but he did excavate out at the crawl space, and it was cool. He actually did something I don't recommend. He took out a couple of support columns.
yeah, he did make some modifications. You're right.
And he
Wow.
blocked,
Curious.
which
The story was,
I was
he
there
was,
when it burned.
yeah.
Can I,
The story-
can I- I'm sorry,
Okay.
go ahead, Brent.
I was just going to say, he was a photographer, and he got involved in staging things and all that. And I think he made a little bit of money early on in making like a lot of the pictures we think for Varney and, you know, the early, back to the 50s, early 60s. And then eventually it grew into layouts. And I think the third one is the one that we always think of, but there were two before that in another house. And he actually tried to sell the house with the layout. It's a fascinating story. But then when he built, well, when his new house was built, like DC was saying, it's on the side of a hill, and they normally have like columns or something that hold the backside of the house up. And he went and he basically created a basement under it. And, you know, he did it himself. Or that was what the whole vision and all that.
Did it
and
himself.
Did it himself, pretty much.
I've actually seen photos
Yeah.
of where he was excavating.
Yeah.
And I can't remember where he's actually, you know, this wasn't like he hired a contractor and they came
No.
in. He had
didn't.
shovel and is hauling dirt out from it. I remember reading that story. It is a fascinating
Oh,
story.
That's what I think. But the point was that he planned way in advance as best we can figure it, other than he didn't like these columns in his house, like DC said. He pulled the columns out and they were structural. So he eventually had to figure out a way to work around that.
I'd like to mention some ideas that we've used on Tom's layout, just to give you guys some ideas of other vignettes, you know, scenes, figures telling a story. Tom's got one of a deserter being executed.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Okay. We've got a couple different signal cores going off in different points. One's on the top of a rocky face, and it's got the big tall tower, and another one's at the across the aisle, and they're communicating to each other. And we've got modified some, oh, let's see, there's a combination of prizer figures. What else did I use? Prizer. There was actually an Airfix figure of a gentleman holding a rifle in his hand, and we cut off the rifle, drilled a hole in it, put a piece of like piano wire in there, and put a little signal flag on there made out of a toothpaste container, tube, yeah. Tom, I'm surprised you didn't show us any of the scenes in your rolling mill. That is just a fantastic
I
story.
thought I already did that. No?
Well,
Okay, I got it.
Anyways,
Yeah.
Drunk, stumbling out of a bar,
right,
in the street.
I got a guy crawling out of the outhouse
Yeah, a
puking.
newsboy and someone else made a news wagon. So
The Intelligencer, yeah.
again, there's all these little stories everywhere you look on. It is overwhelming, but everywhere you look, there's a story on Tom's layout.
Yeah, I decided I needed to count how many figures I had, just because people, how many figures you got here? I don't know, 400, 800. And it's close to 1,000. That includes
Wow.
mules and everything else. That's everything, wagons, yeah. But yeah, I mean, and then to add to the stories, you know, it's without it being too congested, just little vignettes like the Lacey Hotel, which is iconic. Yeah. Anyhow, it's just a lot of fun making stuff up.
Ron, you got to do the interior of the roundhouse. You're gonna need a lot of figures working that area.
He's nodding his head. Yeah, he knows that. Let's not overdo it. It's like, God, you know, sometimes the last thing I want to hear is somebody tell me how much more shit stuff I got to do. God.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get the mud on this one seam to stop cracking. So, you know, I'm kind of one step at a time.
The mud? Oh, the ground cover?
No,
Sheetrock mud.
The sheetrock mud.
Oh.
All the seams I mud, and I got this one mud at a curve that just keeps cracking. So I just keep adding more lace tape. I think I'm done. I haven't gone down to look this morning, but
this is on your back.
Every time a new crack shows up, I got to take another piece of tape and then go back and mud it again. It's like, I hate mudding.
Is this on your backdrop?
Yeah, it's on the backdrop. Everything else is done. I'm ready to paint it, damn it. And in fact, I'm talking to a couple of the art students in the art department about how much they want to get paid to paint part of my backdrop for me. And I'm like, I can't have them start because I'm going to do the backdrop first.
Right. Smart.
You can still get at it.
Let me know how you make out with that, Ron, because I was planning on trying to get some more students to help me out.
Do you have a curve? You have a curve on your backdrop,
Yeah.
don't you?
Yeah,
That's where it's occurring.
corners are
It's because of the material that you use, the
keeps it,
natural
it does this.
expansion.
So I got to put, so you use a flexible tape to do it.
Yeah.
But then a new crack springs up over here. Damn it. So I think I got it solved. I think I'll go down and look this morning, or I haven't looked yet. I'm going to go look, but I think I've solved my problem. So then I'm ready to sand.
Quick question, Ron. How did you vet your potential student artist?
Well, so I just most of you know, I'm in a university. So I just contacted I know the chair of the art department, the BFA program here at Eastern Michigan. And I just contacted her and said, do you got any kids that might be interested in, you know, doing a job and getting paid for it? And she said, I'll just write me up what you want. So I did, and I was surprised. I got like 8 kids who responded back. So they sent me their portfolios. So I asked them all for a portfolio and a letter of recommendation. So I've narrowed it down. I'm going to talk to 6 of them. I got their phone numbers, so I'm going to call them up. A couple of them they're all good. I mean, they're all very talented, but they do different things. I made sure it was real clear in what I asked is that I wanted you to be able to paint a landscape scene. And I sent them some photos of your layout backdrops. I sent them Charlie's backdrops, sent them a couple pictures of Bernie's. So they've got a rough idea. So that's how I'm kind of vetting. Then I'll talk to them, and then if they don't think I'm absolutely crazy after we finish talking, and say, I don't want anything to do with this loon, this build a mile railroad. You know, it's like,
One of the things you could
Well,
do,
what's
Ron, if you have, if you still have a problem with the cracking, on Tom's layout, one of the things we used for the background was, wasn't that a canvas, rolled out canvas, Tom? And you just use wallpaper paste and get that for the whole thing?
But that's not the full length of the ceiling of the wall.
Well, yeah, but Ron's doesn't go up to the ceiling, does it?
Well, not,
No.
but how, if how, it depends upon how high the crack is.
right.
Yeah, but for what Ron's doing, he could use the
We've
full,
got,
the full
Yeah.
width.
I think
Right.
that's a good idea. That's a good idea.
Hey, Ron, you have any idea of the cost, you know, for these students, or is it just like a project or?
I'm roughly guesstimating that I'm probably gonna end up spending $500
Okay.
to have them painted.
How many linear feet is that about?
Oh, it's over 30 feet.
Yeah,
But
that's about what
I'm gonna paint part of it. So I have the ability to paint. What I'm concerned about is some of the perspective with buildings in the
Right.
background.
Right.
I'm not quite as adept at, I can paint scenery and I can paint trees and I can paint back, you know, that kind of. So the
Happy
bulk of
little
it is,
trees.
huh?
Happy little trees.
Yeah, yeah. happy little tree. You still, don't laugh. I used to watch that all the time.
He's great.
I
But
still do.
most of it is sort of rural scenery with hills and that kind of background. It's only that centerpiece where we're actually in Martinsburg, where you got to put roads going back up in the hill. And I just want somebody that's got, and I've, like I said, the couple of them in the work that I've seen that they did, it looks like they're my first choices. So I've already ranked them sort of 1 and 2. But I'll talk to, I'm gonna call them next week and have them come out. My wife's like, you're hiring somebody? And it's like, this is gonna cost us more. How much? This has got to be the most expensive hobby. So my wife's like, yeah, but she asked me, you know, my wood shop is like, how many freaking saws do you need?
Just tell her when you're done, it won't cost anything.
Exactly.
Don't mention that. Don't mention that you'll never be done.
I just tell her she knows where I'm at all the time.
Right. There's got to be a benefit to
I could
that.
be spending money in much worse things in the world. So
It'd be a lot more expensive if you were playing golf.
absolutely. She
I
plays
was
golf.
I was watching a movie the other day, and the murderer was a model railroad hobbyist.
No.
Yeah.
Definitely.
My wife looked at me like, and he, you know, she was going to bed, and he's like, "Oh, I just got to stay. I got to fix my this and that." And I was like, "Oh, look at this is cool." He turned out to be the murderer.
At any
Bullshit. He doesn't have the time for it.
wall.
What was the movie,
Well-
Paul?
I forget. It was a
Okay.
thriller. It was a really good movie. I watched.
Was it on public TV?
It was on Netflix.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was really good. And at the end, the guy Sue was like laughing her ass off.
This is what you guys become? Is that what you're telling me? Wait,
Any minute now.
right. And if I hear you getting frustrated with your model railroad, I know to watch out. Okay,
Another spring disappears into space.
right.
The other thing I watched was very interesting. I don't know if you guys noticed it. There's like a 2021 documentary on the Civil War. I think it's just called The Civil War Today or something like that.
Burns.
It was very interesting that the history written on the Civil War is really geared to the North and the South, and how, you know, how the South, even historians, you know, are, you know, don't present it the way that they want to hear it, as opposed to
What happened?
actually happened. And the interesting part was, a friend of mine's son is probably going to marry a 7th generation Goldstonian. And I met her, and she's like 26 years old. And she was enraged to find out that she was taught, even through high school, that the slaves came over because it was good work for them. And that it was a volunteer. And this is like, she's 26 years old. So the documentary was really, you know, everyone says, why do you get involved in the Civil War? Why are you so interested in it? it, the ramifications of it is still a big part of today's culture.
Of course.
It's
What was the
really-
documentary, Paul?
It's called, I think it's just called, the Civil War. I mean, it was done in 2021.
Is
That's a
that-
Netflix?
Yeah.
I think if you go on Netflix or,
Cool.
Was that Ken Burns for PBS?
I don't think it was PBS. I don't.
Well, I know, but the documentary, The Civil War, was done by Ken Burns about that time. It may have migrated over, but it was originally a PBS.
That was done like 10 years ago,
But
though.
this is like all different aspects, Northern, Southerners, they're asking, a father and his son, it's very, very interesting to see, when you look at politically with, our problems today, a lot of it is stemmed out of the Civil War. At least
Yeah.
that's what this documentary leads you to. I believe it, by the way, but
Right. Yeah.
anyway.
I gotta check that out. Thanks, Paul. So, okay, gentlemen, this is pretty much Cookie. Sorry you got on. We're about to close up here. But maybe you join us next time. And that'll be next Thursday evening. Thanks to Joel and Bernie and Charlie and Mark for sending me your images. And next time it'll be,
Kudos.
huh?
I just said kudos to them.
Yep. And the layout updates next week. I think we'll have, Ron, will you be sharing some stuff? And Paul
Yeah, I'll do something.
and DC?
Yeah.
Yay, guy, I love that energy, man. That's very good. Thank you.
It just means I gotta do work to put it together to do it.
I find that we
You
get
know,
more
the
work done.
downside is I have to quit making turnouts.
Okay. Show us.
This
Joel,
will be posted, right, Tom, on YouTube?
this one will be posted, yes.
But that was for Cookie who got on. Okay.
Oh, yeah, good. Thank you. Hey, Cookie. So maybe you can see us next time, buddy.
Thank you.
All right, guys, have a good weekend.
Yeah, you
You too.
too. Cheers,
Mostly
folks.
Thursday. Bye.
Thank you.